So have you ever agreed to something and you immediately regretted it? This happened to me recently. I work for a company called True Corp. I'm in the roofing division. It's hot. I drink a lot of water. But this coworker of mine named Aaron, he has been on this fitness journey recently. Like, he's been waking up at 5 a.m. I don't wake up that time. I don't even believe Jesus is awake until 7, and that's when I get up. But he's been on this fitness journey, just crushing the gym, working out, and doing all these things. And, like, he every single day has been coming in like, hey, Jonny, man, you want to go for a run, huh? You want to get pumped up? You ready? Like, we could go for a run right now. And I'm like, bro, we're at work, like, not on my lunch break. I want to eat my unhealthy food, and I just want to relax, okay? I'm good. I don't really want to work out. But have you ever met someone who's persistent? Like, and they are so persistent, sometimes it catches you off guard. He's like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm like, I don't know. I don't got much planned. Just going to go home. Perfect, Jonny. Let's go for a run. And he caught me. And it was at this moment I agreed, and so the next day I come into work. I bring my running clothes, and after work, he's like, okay, you ready? I change, and we're in the car, and he's like, okay, we're going to go for a run. We're going to go to a lake. And for me, that sounded perfect, because typically lakes aren't that big, and I got a confession. I really don't like running. The only thing I run from is my problems, and that doesn't really work out. But I hate cardio, and I'm just like, I can do a lake. It may be 1 mile, maybe 2. I can check my box and self-esteem. I'll feel good about myself and say that I exercise, and I won't have to run until next year, you know. And Aaron will get off my back. So if you're familiar with Lakeland, Aaron pulls into this parking lot, and it is Lake Hollingsworth. Now, let me tell you about Lake Hollingsworth. This is not like some little lake. From start to finish, it is 3.1 miles. My heart began to beat, and it was at this moment that I wondered why I even agreed to go running in the first place. So I get out of the car, and I put in my headphones, and I need to get pumped up. I'm listening to super spiritual music, Tom Petty. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this around the lake, and I'm stretching, and I'm just like mentally preparing for this. Like, I haven't ran more than a mile since high school. And Aaron's like, okay, you ready? Like, let's do this. So we begin taking off. And I got to be honest, y'all. I felt good. Like, I'm breathing. I got my music flowing. I'm looking at the scenery. You know, it's a beautiful lake. And I'm just going. I'm like, wow, I'm surprised. Someone's got some endurance today, huh? You know, like, I'm not so bad out of shape. Look at me go. And then it was like 5 minutes later. Next thing I know, I got this massive cramp right here. The sun is beating down on me. My shoe is untied. And I am hating life, wondering why I even agreed to this. And the worst part is I see the mile marker, and it says 0.75. I haven't even made it a mile, and I'm dying. And it's in this moment, I'm like, yo, I am closer to the car. Like, could I just stop? Could I turn back? Could I give up? I mean, I'm at 0.75. I have no idea how I'm going to make it 3.1 miles. No idea. And in my mind, you know, like when you're kind of talking with yourself, like, quit, no, don't do it, you can do this. And we just have like this battle as I'm running, and slowly but surely, I begin to kind of have this system to help me survive this 3.1 mile. I would point out objects or things or buildings, and I would say, if I can just make it to that stop sign, I'll be okay. If I can just make it to that dog that's peeing on the sidewalk right there, I will be okay. If I can just make it to that green car, I will be okay. And can I be honest with you, there were moments where I was trying to make it in between these gaps, and I would stop, and Aaron would have to encourage me and uplift me and say, you can do this. Or I have to take a quick 5-second break and begin running again. But slowly but surely, step by step, moment by moment, minute by minute, we survived that 3.1 mile run. Come on, you can clap for that. That's okay. We survived 3.1 miles. I get to the parking lot, and I absolutely collapse, and I haven't ran since. That's honest to God right there. But if I can be honest with you and transparent, that's how I feel sometimes on my walk with God. There are moments where I'm in the mountaintop. There are moments where I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm in a rhythm. I'm making it. I feel good. And then just how I got hit at that 0.75 mark, there are also moments in my walk with God that are hard. There are moments where I'm literally just trying to make it. There are moments where I'm trying to survive the day or maybe the minute despite the situation that could be thrown at me. I'm just taking it day by day. Can I ask you a question? Do you ever feel like quitting? Do you ever feel like giving up? Because the reality of the matter is that sometimes it's easier to throw in the towel than it is to endure, right? Come on, that teenager that talks back, sometimes just say, okay, you make your own decisions if you know what's best. Oh, this marriage that's got friction, you know what? Oh, you just do that. No, sometimes it's easier just to give up on a situation instead of enduring. However, in our faith walk, to keep our faith alive and well, endurance and perseverance are a necessity to walk in this life with Jesus. And walking with Jesus sometimes is easy, but the hard part is enduring. See, the definition of enduring is this: suffer something painful or difficult, and then it throws this little word at the end: patiently. Patiently. Like, that's not like a sexy definition to me, like, sign me up to endure. No, you're telling me suffering, you're telling me pain, and then you're going to throw this word at the end that says patiently? See, there was this this group of people in the Bible that was being persecuted. And I'm not just talking about like kicked off YouTube. I'm not just talking about people making fun of them. No, they were being imprisoned for their faith. They were being murdered publicly. They were being persecuted. People were literally pointing them out, and they were going through such a hardship. And this hardship was causing people to begin to step away from the faith and the very thing that they believed in. And this is where we find ourselves in the context of Hebrews chapter 12. And the author of Hebrews chapter 12, he is speaking directly to the people who are going and living in this persecution. And he's literally challenging them. He's saying, hey, I challenge you not to walk away from your faith in Jesus because you are being persecuted. I encourage you to endure despite the persecution that is going on around you. And here's what he says. We're going to focus Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. And it says, and bear with me, I wasn't intensive reading. It took me a little bit to pass the FCAT, but we will survive this. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with, here's this word, endurance, the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he, here's this word, endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. After all, you have not yet given your lives in the struggle against sin. So this author of Hebrews is beginning to address some ways that we can endure. And he kind of breaks it up into two sections. And the first thing that he addresses, he says, hey, believer, hey, person who is going through trials, hey, person who is on this walk with Jesus, if you want to endure, we must strip off weight and sin. See, I love my dad. My dad is like completely old school. He was born in 1953. He's part of the boomer generation. Like, I love the boomers. But my dad, he says some crazy things. We got like an amazing relationship. He's one of my heroes. But he does some things that drive me insane. I'm just being honest with you. And he always says these things. Like, I remember, like, when I was young, you used to always tell me, like, Johnny, when I was your age, I used to have to walk to school both ways uphill in the snow with no shoes. I'm like, Dad, no, you didn't. He's like, well, it felt like it, son. You know, you need to learn to grow up. It's like, okay, Dad, I get it. He says things like, in this household, Johnny, we do not call a handyman. We fix things ourselves. Anybody else? I saw some wives like look at their husband. Sorry. But anyway, and the ironic thing is that my dad, when he goes to fix things, he ultimately breaks it, and then we have to call a handyman. Pray for him. And lastly, one of the things that my dad does that absolutely drives me insane, this is by far my biggest frustration with him. When we are going on a road trip and we are traveling somewhere, he refuses to trust a GPS because the back roads are always faster. I'm like, Dad, it says interstate. No, son, trust me, the Spirit is leading me. We're taking the back roads. I'm like, no, Dad, technology, trust it. Trust it. For example, 3 years ago, me, my dad, Pastor Kieran, and 3 other people, we were going to Haiti on a 10-day mission trip. We were going there to build a second story on this orphanage, and And we were just so excited. So we show up to the church bright and early, and some of you have been on these trips. You know how it goes. You go out there, your family, you're out there, I love you. If I don't come back, I'm with Jesus. You're just talking with them and loading up all your luggage, and that's what we did. And we get in the car, and I'm sitting up front beside my dad. He's driving, and I'm like, hey, Dad, we got to go all the way to Orlando. From where we used to live is about 2.5 hours. I'm like, hey, the GPS is really recommending that if we want to be on time for our flight, we need to take the interstate. Like, the back roads, it adds an extra 40 minutes. He's, come on, Dad, please. I plead with you, Father in heaven. No, can we please just take the interstate and trust it? He's like, nah, son, that 40 minutes is a myth. I'll be able to shave that off, son, and I know exactly where we're going and how to get there. I've been doing this since before you were born. I'm like, okay. I just stopped fighting in that moment. So we're going, and we get into this back road, and at first, everything is fine, but then you get like that driver that drives 10 miles under the speed limit, and that's a frustration there. And then after that, like a cow walks out in front of us, and we get caught behind 2 tractors that are going super slow, and I'm literally watching the time dwindle away, and I'm looking at our flight, and I'm trying not to become anxious, and I'm checking the GPS, and my dad's just going along. The back roads will get us there, and we pull into the airport literally 45 minutes before our flight leaves. 45 minutes, and we're panicking. We're like, oh my gosh, we got to check in. We got to get there. We don't want to miss our flight. So the trunk opens, and we have so much luggage. We're just grabbing because we're going 10 days to Haiti to build. So we got tools that we're grabbing, and it didn't matter whose luggage you have, whose bag you have. You just grab it, and you get ready. And I remember I had like 15 bags on me. It was like a workout, and we begin to move. And we're all loaded down. We're trying to catch our flight. And literally, we're going so slow because we're so weighed down. We get to the elevator, you all cram in, and we get out, and we're just running as fast as we can, which wasn't really fast because we were so weighed down. And we get to the front desk, and we say, hey, please, all of us for Haiti, and here's all of our luggage. We need to get there now. Our flight is about to leave. And the lady behind the desk, she looks at us and she says, hey, I'm sorry, but you're too late. The destination that you thought you were going today, you're not going to be able to. We're going to have to reschedule you. I can remember we were so frustrated. I can remember, you prepare for this trip. You prepared for somewhere that you're going to be going, but then all of a sudden you're told that you're not going to be able to go there. And my question for us, church, how many times have we missed the destination that Jesus wants to take us to because we are weighed down by sin and because we are weighed down by the weights of this life? How many times have we missed it? To where He wants to bring us into a new season, into a new chapter, to leave that old life behind, but we are weighed down and we look like this. It's funny, when you're weighed down, it's kind of hard to worship. When you're weighed down, it's sometimes hard because you're carrying all this shame to make your way to the altar. Because, if people really knew what I struggled with, if they really knew what I battled with, and this baggage that I carried, would they really be there for me? See, I don't know about you, but I relate to this. See, there's been moments in my life where I've been weighed down by sin. There's been moments in my life where I've been weighed down externally and internally. There's been moments in my life where something that just started as maybe a casual habit now becomes something that is so heavy on me. And maybe today in this service you feel weighed down. Maybe by anger towards your father because you walked out. Maybe by shame because of things you went through. Maybe you just feel so heavy because you feel like God is not around. I don't know what you're walking through. But the first step in fixing your problem is admitting it's there. The first step in fixing it is admitting it's there. And at Arise, we have a core value that says we are authentic. It's okay not to be okay. See, the reality is that today is a new day. Listen to me. You are not entitled to be even the same person you were 5 minutes ago through the grace of Jesus Christ. Today is a new day. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. See, we have to begin to identify the things that are weighing us down and the sin that is tangling us up. Because the reality is, if we live in sin, we often, rarely, never endure. If we live in sin, with it always and weighed down, we typically won't endure. If we want to endure, we got to strip it off. So how does that look practically? How does it look? Today, maybe you're weighed down and you're like, okay, I hear all these words that you're saying, but what does that look like, Jonny? See, and here's just 3 steps that I believe that can help us begin to strip off this weight and to begin to strip off this sin that so easily entangles us. The first is we must be in community. We must be in community. And when I say community, I'm not talking about the wrong community. I'm talking about the right community. Because the reality is you can have the right vision, but with the wrong people, that dream is irrelevant. You can dream up all the person that you want to be, but the simple truth of the matter is that your closest friends, your inner circle, are either helping you become the person that God sees in you, or they are holding you back from where He wants to take you. We have to have the right community. People that not tell us what we want to hear, people that tell us that what we need to hear. People who push us, people that say, hey, you're hurting, I'm going to be there. You're feeling alone, let's get coffee. You need prayer, I'm going to show up. I may not have an answer for the situation that you are going through, but I am walking through this with you. We need community. There's no such thing as a Christian island. In my lonely moments, in my moments where I isolated myself, was moments that I was my most vulnerable. See, sin left alone and in the dark always grows. We can't face some of these battles and trials that life throws at us alone. We must be in community. See, the second point is, I originally wrote out prayer, but I scratched it off. I wrote talk to Jesus. I think sometimes what we do is, when it comes to prayer, is we overthink it. We overcomplicate it. Like, I don't know the philosophical way to address Jesus. Is it dad? Is it father? Is it like your humble No, like, listen, talk to Jesus. Literally, when your kids are napping and you got a moment, talk to Him. When you're driving in your car on your commute, talk to Him. In those moments when you are alone and you have a second, speak to Him. Speak to Him about everything and every aspect in your life. And what does that look like? It could just be as simple as, hey, God, I thank you for today. Hey, God, not my will for my life, but yours. Hey, God, I know I'm going through these things. Can you please help me? Talk to Jesus. But you see, that's just part of it. Talk to Jesus and listen. And listen. See, my wife and I, if I just continually talked to her but I didn't listen, we wouldn't get very far. We have to listen. We have to create a moment and a space in our life to where we can tune out all distractions and listen for that still, small voice. I've heard people make this statement before, saying that God is not speaking. And I challenge him and push back on this thought that you cannot say that He's not speaking if your Bible is closed and you are not sitting and listening, because I promise you, Jesus is speaking. The real question is, are we listening? We have to talk to Jesus and we have to listen. Thirdly, start today. Start today. We do not have to wait for New Year's to make change and resolutions in our life. Start today. There's been so many times in my life where I've sat and I've heard a message that truly convicted me, and I'm like, you know what, I'll deal with that tomorrow. No. Start today. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. We must start today. We must start setting boundaries and parameters in our life through the Word of God and through healthy community and through prayer that can help us become the people that God has called us to be. Because if nothing changes in your life, then nothing changes. And you see, the author of Hebrews understands this. He understands that your walk with Jesus, my walk with Jesus, is already hard enough. Can I get an amen on that? It's already hard enough. But if we want to endure, we have to strip off weight and sin. And the second thing that he addresses is, starting in verse 2, he says, we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he, here's this word, endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. After all, you have not given your lives in the struggle against sin. See, the second concept that the author of Hebrews is addressing is, okay, yes, we have to strip off the weight and the sin that so easily entangles us. But secondly, if we want to endure, we must keep our eyes on Jesus. We have to keep our eyes on Jesus no matter what situation we are walking through. We have to keep our eyes on him. See, my dad used to always tell me when I was young, hey, son, you have to be careful. Son, you have to be careful that the places that you go, the things that you do, the people you associate with, because the reality is whatever gets your attention ultimately will get you. The things that you continually concentrate on is the direction that you are going to begin to move in your life. Whatever gets your attention gets you. And we see this true in Matthew chapter 14. See, Matthew chapter 14, if you're not familiar with it, that's okay. We're gonna go through it together. We see that Jesus, he just got done feeding all the people. It was a long day of ministry. And then he says, hey, to his disciples, get in the boat and go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And I just got to go to Israel last year. It's amazing. If you haven't gone, shameless plug, you need to go to Israel. It's beautiful. It's massive. And so he puts his disciples in a boat, and he says, go to the other side, and I'll meet you there. So it says that the disciples, they take off, and they're going, and they're rowing. I bet they wish they had a motor. And they're just, rowing and going to the other side. And it says that they're hit with a storm, that they begin to get battered by the waves and by the wind. And they're getting kind of tossed around. And it says it was around 3 a.m. in the morning. If you've never been in a storm in a boat, I can tell you it's scary. 3 a.m. in the morning, they see this figure walking on the water towards them. They begin to panic. I mean, wouldn't you? They're like, oh my gosh, we're in this storm. That's the death angel. We're all going to die. They begin to freak out. It's a ghost. But as this figure gets closer, it calls out and says, hey, be afraid, it is I. And in this moment, we see Peter respond, hey, Lord, hey, Jesus, if it's really you, then tell me to come to you. And this is where we're going to pick up in the story. It says, Jesus said, come. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on water, and came towards Jesus. But listen to this, when he saw the wind and the waves, he was afraid and began to sink, and he cried out, Lord, save me. So let's just walk through this really quick, because a lot just happened in that. So they're in this storm. They see Jesus. He calls out, yes, come to me, Peter. So Peter now steps out of the boat. I guess that's my best, stepping out of the boat. And he's standing on water. Despite the fact that there's a storm going on, Peter is standing on water. He lets go, and he begins to move in the direction of Jesus. Everything is fine. He is on top of the storm. He is moving towards him. But then it says he began to look at the waves. He noticed the wind and the waves. And then in a split second, he went from on top of this situation, walking with Jesus, to now sinking in the water in this storm and screaming out, Lord, save me. And I'm guilty of this. Oftentimes in my life, I can begin to move and I'm in a relationship with Jesus, but then I look over and I see this problem that I have. I can begin to move in the direction of Jesus and the things that he called me to, but I can get distracted by social media. I can get distracted by the things that are going on in the world. I can get distracted by basic, simple problems, and I go from on top of them in a good place with Jesus to now in the water screaming out, Lord, can you help me? I've done it. Still to this day, I have to work through this. See, in a simple little illustration of this is, I want everyone to close their left eye. Now take your right thumb while looking at me. I want you to bring your thumb closer, closer, closer until you can no longer see me. Hold it there. See, I'm still here. I'm way bigger than your thumb. I'm talking to you. I'm on stage. But guess what? You can't see me. You can put down your thumb. Sorry, someone's over there like, it's okay, bro. Go to the gym. I need to too. But you can't see me. See, whatever you magnify in your life becomes bigger. And oftentimes in my life, I've magnified the wrong thing. I have magnified the things that I'm walking through, the things that don't matter, my insecurity, my shame. And I forget that there's this person named Jesus who's on the other side. And my challenge to us, church, what are you magnifying in your life? Are your problems in their proper perspective? Because the reality is there is a God who is behind your problem, who is bigger. There is a God in Isaiah 40:31 who said, for those who trust in the Lord, they find a new strength. They soar high on the wings of eagles. They can run and not grow weary, and they can endure. We see that there is a God that is sovereign, that in Romans 8:28, he said, I can work all things together for your good. We see that in Jeremiah 29:11, in a dark time, when people were in captivity, one of the darkest moments, he said, I still have a plan. But oftentimes we forget it. We just hold it so big in front of our face that we forget how big God is and that he's in control. If we want to endure, we must keep our eyes on Jesus. You see, Jesus himself experienced hardships. Jesus himself experienced trials. Jesus himself experienced betrayal. Jesus was ultimately beaten and nailed to a torture tool for you and for I, and ultimately gave his life. We look at the disciples. We looked at Bartholomew. He was skinned alive and clubbed to death. James was stoned and clubbed to death. We look at Peter. He was crucified. Thomas was impaled by a spear. And dare I keep going, because if you're not aware, every single disciple except for John was a martyr for the faith. And that didn't exclude John from many hard trials and many hard things that he walked through in his life. We look at Paul, who wrote over half of the New Testament. He said this in 2 Corinthians 11:23 through 29. He says, I've worked much harder, been jailed more often, beaten up more times than I can count, and at death's door time after time. I've been flogged 5 times with the Jews, 39 lashes, beaten by Romans, rods 3 times, pummeled with rocks once. I've been shipwrecked 3 times and immersed in the open sea for a night and a day. In hard traveling year in and year out. I've had to ford rivers, fend off robbers. I've struggled with friends. I've struggled with foes. I've been at risk in the city, at risk in the country, endangered by the desert sun and the sea storm, and betrayed by those who I thought were my brothers. I've known drudgery and hard labor, many long and lonely nights without sleep, many missed meal, blasted by the cold, naked to the weather. And that's not even half of it when you throw in the daily pressures and anxieties of all the churches. Jonny, why are you telling me this? Why are you saying all this? Because I'm here to tell you, in case you didn't know, just because you are a Christian does not mean that it excludes you from trials. Just because you are a Christian doesn't mean that there aren't going to be moments where you have to get on your knees and pray for your family. Just because you're a Christian, it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be hard times where you feel weighed down. But Paul, who went through all of that, he's later quoted in Acts 20:24 saying, but my life is worth nothing to me unless I use it for finishing the work assigned to me by the Lord Jesus. The work of telling others the good news about the wonderful grace of God. How did they endure? They kept their eyes on Jesus, knowing that this world can throw stuff at them. It can throw problems, but Jesus is on the other side. You can make it. We have to keep our eyes on Jesus. Keep looking to him, despite how dark the night looks. Keep looking to him. What does looking to him mean? Looking to Jesus means learning to live like Jesus. How do you live like Jesus? You spend time with him. You spend time with him. See, maybe you're in here and you're like, you don't know my story, man. You don't know the weight that I hold, and you're absolutely right, I don't. See, in my life, there's been times where I've had to endure. I'm a pastor's kid, and I grew up in church, and every Sunday, every Wednesday you didn't miss, and If you were sick, they brought you to church and then they prayed for you. It was like, I just couldn't, you couldn't miss church. I can remember growing up and just loving Jesus. But I can remember by the time I turned 17, 18, I began to wonder if I genuinely believed in God because I believed in God or because my parents drugged me to church every day. I began to wrestle and feeling like I did not fit in the church world. I can remember slowly but surely, because sin is always gradual, beginning to hang out with the wrong crew and the wrong community. To stop talking with Jesus. To stop stripping off the sin and stuff that entangled me. And really just avoiding my problems. Thinking that they would go away if I didn't deal with them. And slowly but surely, my life began to take a turn, and it took me places that I never thought that I would go. And it brought me around people that I never thought that I'd be around. I can remember having such severe depression that there'd be times I'd be driving my car and just wondered what happens if I just hit this tree. Because I don't think my life is worth living. Lacking purpose. There wasn't a week that I couldn't go without getting drunk or high. And just trying to fill this God-shaped hole inside of here. And ultimately, it was February 19th of 2021. I was in Lakeland for one of my buddy's fraternity parties, and I can just remember staying up all night, and everyone was asleep in this dirty, nasty house, and I'm just sitting in a corner, and I kind of just have this prodigal moment. You know, like when you sit beside the pigsty, and he's like, even my master or my father's servants have food to spare, and here I am. I begin to look around at just this nasty house and the environment and reflecting on my life, asking, how did I end up here? See, but if it was just brokenness in that moment that I felt, I don't think that I would be here today. But in my darkest moment in this house, to where I wasn't even living right, I began to feel this still small voice that said, Jonny, I love you. I still have a plan for you. I care for you. There's not a sin that will hold me back from coming after you. I can remember walking out of that house and going to church that Sunday, still smelling like the bar from the night before. And it was in that moment that things began to change in my life. But to be honest with you, just because I had an encounter with Jesus didn't mean that all this baggage just fell off overnight. There were things and habits that I had to learn to give to Jesus. Pornography was one of them. Addiction was one of them. Lust was one of them. And the list goes on. I know that I have far more weaknesses than I do strengths. And through this process, I'm thankful I'm not where I used to be, but I still have ways to go. And today, I just want to take a moment. Just felt led to say there's someone in here who's going through that. God's not mad at you. He's madly in love with you, and he has a plan, but he loves you so much, he does not want to leave you where you're at. He wants to take you somewhere new. He wants to strip it off. And he also wants you to begin to keep your eyes fixated on him and moving in the direction that he has for your life. Can we bow our heads? Today, maybe you don't have a relationship with God. Maybe you can relate to just your parents dragging you, or you're just like, you know what, I'm just going to try it because my life has hit this place and I just don't know what else to do. Maybe today you are a Christian. You have a relationship with God. But the things that have been getting your attention are not the things of God. And you've just begun to become weighed down by life's problems and trials and not keeping them in their proper place. Whether that's you or not, I just want to let you know that today's a new day. As a community, as a church, we can walk through these seasons together. That doesn't mean that the pain isn't there. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that there isn't a weight. But we know that Jesus will help us get through it. So in this moment, I don't know what you need to fixate on. I know that I have plenty of things that I need to give to Jesus. But our altar team is going to be joining us today. And if you need prayer, please do not walk out of this building. If you need community, please, when those doors don't open, don't just shoot out. Today, let's begin to deal with these things. Today, let's begin to give them to Jesus. And let's begin to fix our focus on Him. Let's pray. Dear God, I thank you so much. Dear God, I'm so thankful that you lived the life that I could never live and died the death that I should have died. I'm thankful for your grace. I'm thankful for your love. I'm thankful for your mercy, dear God. I pray today that you can start with me, dear God. You can begin to convict me in areas that I need, dear God, because this message wasn't just for someone else. It was for me, dear God. I pray that today that someone who is walking through it, dear God, that they can begin to feel peace, that they can begin to have people who partner beside them, lifting their arms and praying and walking through this dark night with them. And dear God, lastly, if someone does not know you, I pray that today that they can commit their lives or recommit their lives to you. We thank you, and God, all God's people said.
Subscribe.